It is 7:02.
Recording in progress.
I will call the regular meeting of the Andover Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Next up is roll call and seating of alternates. So
I see we've got Ann. We'll start out with Ann, but you just vote first. We'll get back.
Oh, Patrick, yeah, you're not gonna be able to, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Then we got Scott. Patrick. Leanne. And me, so. Kevin and Anne Marie, thank you for coming tonight. We won't be seeing either of you and if, I think everybody knows that Susan England resigned since the last time we met. She just got a bunch of different family issues going on, kind of like Steve Nelson did earlier, and that does not allow her to take the time she needs to dedicate to this, so she submitted her resignation. Next up is additions or changes to the agenda. And I have none. Anybody else aware of any? Nope. So at that point, we'll move on to public speak. Anybody from the public here that wants to speak about anything that we're not going to be talking about on the agenda? And looks like a no there as well, so. Next up is old business, and we start out with the plan of conservation and development. And I guess we'll let Patrick and Elaine take it away.
Oh, we'll let Patrick take it away, I'll just stand up.
Very good, it's all yours, Patrick.
Oh, thank you. Can somebody show me how to share the PowerPoint on the screen here?
Sure, John, can you make sure you give Patrick permission to share?
Yep, sharing is allowed.
Oh, there's a button that says share.
Click share. Okay, and then pick which one you want to share, probably that one right there, yeah, and say share. Great, thank you. Give it a second.
Yeah.
Then
Hey, there we go.
you're gonna wanna hit that, the full screen button. Right, up, right there. Should that work? We should.
It's a little screen thing at the bottom.
Yep, that guy right there. There you go. Aha. You win. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one step more than I was ever able to do. I got that screen you were on before, that was as good as I could do, so you're off and running, Patrick.
Right. So these are the concepts and ideas that an Economic Development Commission is going to recommend for our next plan of conservation and development. We're gonna be focusing on smaller scale neighborhood-based businesses, and we need to help them grow here in Andover, because a lot of home-based businesses start and then they outgrow their house and then they wanna they expand, but then they move their business to some of our surrounding towns and cities, which have more commercial spaces available. And so we wanna start making sure that they can thrive here. So going hand in hand with that, we wanna make sure that, you know, all the services and businesses that everybody was surveyed in our town, the coffee shops, the home services, bicycle shops, restaurants, and the small workshops will be available here without traveling to the next town over, you know. We also are investigating small business mixed use hubs. So that's a concept that we talked about 10 years ago with mixed use development. So that's the ability to have a dwelling on the same property as a commercial building. Now, we don't currently, to my knowledge, have any, but that's really kind of what we're looking for.
But we've got the regulation to support it.
The regulations are already there, they're starting, but I think we need to really define what we would like to see. You know?
Okay,
That's the main point.
Tweak to fit.
Yes.
Was that Wayne?
tweak.
Wait, okay.
And to fit Andover's rural character, I mean, you know, we want it to still look like Andover without looking overdeveloped.
And over with better coffee.
Sure, that's it. One of the things we could do is expand as right uses for these mixed use facilities. And going hand in hand, with what we just talked about is the design guidance, so some people call it, design standards. But we would be calling it design guidance, you know, these are the types of buildings that we think fit in our neighborhood and our surrounding towns. And encourage anybody that wants to develop in our town to follow suit. We also investigated, some towns, they convert older houses that may be in a high traffic area into small restaurants, and that's one of the things we're looking into. And yeah, there we go, we still are, we want to keep the town character. Next page. We're also really excited to try and promote some more tourism in our town. Before I go through the list, a couple years back, my wife and I were up at the Old Town Hall, and we met some travelers from out of the country. And they were, you know, looking at all the colonial sites. And there's a couple markers here and there, but that's really what a lot of people come to our town for. They wanna go up down the trail, they wanna see the historic places. And so that's stressed here in the slide, I think. Oh, maybe not the slide, okay, back to the list. Yeah, actually, it's the first thing on the list, town guides, and some can be maybe located at or near the trail crossings. Focus on our historic places like the Rochambeau marker. Really investigate the auxiliary uses for farms, farmers markets, agritourism fairs, and to maybe sponsor local events. Also, we need to really finalize what properties are best suited for these needs, because we really don't want to encroach on the conservation land and get too close to the river. We want to keep, you know, we don't want to just do the whole strip of Route 6, you know, that would be counterproductive. Also, we want people to be able to walk or bike there. That's one of the big goals that that was identified in the last plan of conservation development. And we see all the sharrows now, and we have crossings on Route 6, and that's gonna help with the tourism. Oh, and now also the last thing, we don't have really any lodging in town, so if we're gonna try to attract tourism, we need to address that too.
Would that be the bed and breakfast thing?
Bed and breakfast to start, and maybe some smaller, maybe a hotel, and maybe a small inn.
Airbnb.
There's already a few.
Well, there are Airbnbs around the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause I mean, we've got the veterans, Agent Orange Memorial. And there's a very, I think we're the only ones in the state, you know, so a lot of people come just to be there. Just to sit there, and where do they go, what do they do, so. It would be good to have something.
That's definitely good points. I think with the hotel lodging, we gotta be careful a little bit because there
Yeah.
are people moving there permanently. So, you know, homeless people, whatever, Airbnb is more popular amongst people who travel like that, I think. So I'm sure it's worth doing a survey. Just go on Airbnb and look at Andover and Columbia, how many Airbnbs are, you'd be surprised how many there are. So.
We want them to spend their money here in Andover.
Absolutely, no, absolutely, yeah, and you know, for them, a 2-minute drive from Columbia Lake to Andover shouldn't be an issue to spend that money, so.
Yep. That leads us to, we did a lot of discussion, and we would like to see the town as the development leader. And that goes hand in hand with literally acquiring property if possible, and you know, see that the town can make some money off of their own properties, if possible. We also talked about a town business park, other than retail, so something off of Route 6 that would spur economic growth. And also the small business mixed use hubs. And John brought up, our town planner calls it a sinking fund for development land, and that's like a, kind of like a, can pipe in, John, and explain that. I'm sorry, I don't know it too well, but.
Well, it's basically the converse of setting aside money to acquire open space. You know, you establish a fund, you set aside a little bit of money every year, and then you have a fund available should a you know, a targeted property become available, or someone offers you you know, an opportunity. So it's just having funds at the ready over time.
Thank you.
So one of the thoughts, that. I was always disappointed that we didn't get the little piece of land off of Merritt Valley, and it's set out back to your buddy, the down property. And at the time, we were only looking at open space. And I said, I'm not sure we really wanted that for open space. That would be the kind of thing that the town would want, so that we could, build a nice housing development or something back there and have the access both through here or from off of Merritt Valley Road, that kind of thing. So it was, in retrospect. But then we all see how successful we were getting money in the budget for open space this year. There's a lot of thinking about, just buying property for other things. So that's gonna be a bit of a stretch, but.
Yeah, it may be seen as differently too, because people realize, no, now we're putting a fund to go ahead and get areas for development that the town can benefit from, as opposed to just open space, so nothing happens there. You know what I mean? It might, they might see it differently.
But I never,
It's a
Recognize-
economic thing.
the need to have the town purchase property to spur the development is,
Yeah,
one of those light bulbs that started to come on with me, and I see that need.
and a lot of the discussion came because, like, I was with Leanne on the Hot River Route 6, LADA plan that was done. And they talked about the village node, and we kept bringing up the village node, and that's where it said, oh, we need mixed use areas so that they can have housing, little shops and stuff all in one area. And they came up with great plans of things to do. And it went nowhere, so this is kind of we still have that vision, we still kind of wanna move it forward and do something with it. It was a valuable look at, and they even talked about the small business, little industrial park out there on the back post property, that off of Route 6, you have to go down the road and stuff, get into it and stuff like, just, to utilize land, for economic growth, so it was great, we just wanna keep building on it.
Okay, sounds good.
And that leads us right into housing, economic development. We've identified a need for more starter and downsizer options, which would be, smaller square footage residences, and more, in the middle of the price range, because it seems in our town, we have a gap. Some people call it the missing middle, sometimes it's called the gap, between the lowest and the highest price houses in our town. I remember from the last conservation development plan, like an average teacher salary, can they buy a house in our town, and what's the availability for that to stay in our own town? Also, the smaller house and parcel sizes and plan development. We're revisiting regulations on accessory dwelling units and granny pods. We already have in-law apartment allowances that can be attached to your house. We're gonna look more into that. Over 55 housing availability.
So that with the,
But
I would say that we allow granny pods. Now maybe you're talking about something that's not got a permanent foundation or something, you bring in a trailer or something, I don't know, but. The accessory dwelling unit, I thought was the same thing.
It's similar, but I think right now we don't permit people to live in trailers in our town. As
We don't.
as right, but we could identify areas where that might be acceptable, right?
We do for a period of time, right?
For a certain amount of time, okay.
I wasn't familiar with that. Not really. I mean, on a case by case basis, the ZBA has allowed that in the past. In cases, usually in cases where a house burned down because of a fire or something, it allowed somebody to live in a trailer on site for a period of time while the house is reconstructed.
I mean, we have to stay with regulation, because I know that we have regulation. The state regulation.
And I'd have to go back and check, I'm pretty confident we're not in total compliance with that, Public Act 2129 that did talk about allowing trailers in, and our regs currently.
For a period of time.
Yeah, I don't know the details, it was never got around to that one yet.
Well, it had started like with an appeals process, like you said, CBA was working with
Yeah.
that. So if we can make it some kind of a standard, then people don't have to go to appeals every time they wanna do something.
Well, but you have to ask yourself, is that really what you want to do? And maybe the answer is yes, I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just saying that that's something certainly in the past.
Well, for
that
middle
has led
housing,
to-
you know, middle housing is all of this.
Well, middle housing, the term middle housing really relates more towards duplexes and triplexes, that's what's
Mhm.
traditionally considered middle housing density, so it's not an apartment complex, but it's a duplex or a triplex.
Right.
And there are a series of bills up in the legislature right now that would essentially force towns to allow duplexes and triplexes as of right. Don't think they'll go anywhere in this legislative session, but
Because
that's,
it's a 10-year plan we're working on, so.
yeah, no, I'm just giving you the history.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, right.
And we could do that in town with our current regulations, and I'm certainly not opposed to that, my sense is there's probably some residential areas where people wouldn't want a duplex showing up in the middle of that. But if we were to have a middle or affordable housing development someplace that's not sprinkled all over town, but kind of clustered together, I think that'd be a great thing.
Yeah, and even the 55 housing, plus housing, I know we had an approved lot up there at the end of Bear Swamp, right? I think Maze's property or something, but then things changed and there was no money to go ahead and do it.
Yep.
So, when I was selling that lot across, 162 acres across from, the dump, we,
Transfers.
the transfer station, the old dump.
Affectionately known as.
Yeah. Some of the plans we were showing was 55 housing, possibilities and stuff, but, then when the person who bought it's like, have one residence on it, it's like, oh, well, there goes that.
Let me know when across the street from Bear Swamp goes up for sale, I'll buy it. I live like right there, there's no way I'm gonna want anything. The reason why I bought the house is because I'm next to the forest, it's quiet,
Yeah,
so
I know.
if it goes up for sale, let me know.
and that's.
That's a good point, like, that's why it's important for us to identify the areas where these
Yes.
ideas will work well.
Where
And
they
they-
work.
Yeah,
And we have identified some of those.
some, yeah,
I-
there's still some more growth.
I think 55 over is great.
What's that?
55 over is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it doesn't have, to be. We could do a mixed use, development along Route 6 or something to do that, but again, it's, it's a localized thing, it's not, people out on Bear Swamp aren't gonna be offended by the fact that we've got, some triplexes and that in, like Lindholm Corners, for instance, right down there off the 87 in Route 6,
Yeah,
Your period of life where you are makes a difference. When we moved here 20 years ago, we were looking for land and quiet in the woods, we bought 2 acres. Now, we can't afford to maintain something like that. so we're very glad we had built the in-law apartment on it, and we moved into that now.
Yeah.
And now we would really jump at something like the 55 housing, the middle housing,
Yeah.
something
I would
that's
jump
small
on
lots.
it.
We got friends who are moving into a 55+ community in Mansfield, up near the stores at 44. You know, it first looks like it's a trailer park, but it's a 55+, they're putting in double wides in there and
Jensen Home.
Is that it?
Yeah, we're going to 44,
right near.
before you
Right
guys.
before you get 195.
yep,
It's a
exactly.
very nice little community and it's close, you know, it's close, but that's what people want when they're that age and they can't afford or maintain. And if we could find some way to do that.
And to your point, you wanna stay in town, and you wanna downsize, so moving into a 55 locally would make sense. right?
Yeah,
there's no
so a
place
lot of
to
people
downsize.
want that.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we got a lot of people that are heading that direction.
Right. So,
I have 4 acres, it's not enough for me, I want 4. So,
I know, and if
You'll be-
you're not
you'll be
70
okay,
years old,
very
right?
cheap.
Yeah.
I heard there might be a property for sale there, so.
Hey, you know,
So you got a lot of,
can we build a bridge across the Bear Swamp so I can get to that?
Okay, go ahead, I see you got the sewer thing there.
Yeah, that is a last minute addition to my presentation.
Okay.
Because practically speaking, we do know there's new smaller packaged wastewater systems available. And we're lucky enough to have Megan on our economic development, she's very versed in the how the water needs to be treated, you know. But that we also talked about having sewer connection along Route 6, now that would be the biggest. Well, that's right, and at that point, if it was connected, it would open up a lot more possibilities, that's, I added to the list. Yeah.
So Scott Rand, has there been any discussion with the board of selectmen on anything like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Occasionally people bring it up,
But it's not like
it
we're,
doesn't go anywhere.
okay. Mike,
Just
my
that
thinking is,
usually
at some
there's
point,
a need for sewer connection, just like we spring up.
my thought was at some point. The need for affordable housing will be so great that the state will pop up money, put in a sewer so we can put in affordable housing. And then we wanna have it in our P O C D that we're ready to support that, you know. If we were to be that, get that kind of a financial break.
And there's always talk of having to get a sewer system over by the lake. At some point in time, being forced to do it. And if that's the case, then we're coming up from Columbia. And then that opens up that little 87 Lincoln's Corner area.
Yep.
And
Yep.
also it'll have some sewer. You never know, we can dream.
The other thing to consider is that the health codes in Connecticut have been relaxed somewhat in the last 4 to 5 years, so you're allowed to have a lot more discharge into a system without tripping higher levels of scrutiny. So, I mean, you can certainly today cluster, like, it works to cluster like up to 8 teeny homes on one septic system and on a single well today. So one of the ways you can build that cluster is to just do that, and so there's advantages and disadvantages to the, what's called the packet septic treatment plants. Their success rate has not been super great, both in Connecticut and New England. And the thing to keep in mind as a town is that if it's a true packet wastewater system, it's a town responsibility. Ultimately, if it fails, not the community's responsibility. And that's a little weirdness in Connecticut's law. However, if you have, say, 8 tiny homes with 1 leach field, that is not a packet wastewater system, and that is the owner's responsibility. So from a liability standpoint, you know, today the ability to cluster that makes a lot of sense, if it's designed thoughtfully. I think you certainly can do a series of small developments if it's done really thoughtfully, and be successful, and I shared examples of that with the commission in the past.
That's it. So let me just, one of the things that I think is, an opportunity right now, and maybe they come and go all the time. We've got 3 big parcels of land that are sitting out there with for sale signs on them, well, I guess Lindholm Corners probably doesn't. But we got the fish farm, we've got the gravel pit, across the street from it. And you would think there might, I don't know if we have any thoughts on how to take advantage of that opportunity that's sitting there now.
Well, we do, I mean, Beata being a real estate agent, has definitely been in communication with a lot of developers and
Okay.
stuff, and so. That whole area, I guess the auto parts
Yep.
part of it sold.
I am not aware of that.
Yeah, and it might have sold, but hopefully it still is, the area to the right of it is available still. Cause that would be a good spot for one of these, multiple businesses, like
Yep.
some incubator kind of,
You bet.
buildings where people can have, different spots in the building for their businesses. That would be an ideal spot for them. But, it's a matter of getting developers interested in maybe doing that.
No, but,
Certainly the town won't be able to buy it, but.
well, we've had some initial conversations with Mr. Fitch on his pre-farm, that is a nice place for, a mixed-use development kind of thing, and, we've had some conversations with, the fellow that owns, the Lindholm Corners out there, and,
Right.
he sounded like he was enthused a little bit, but, we've never heard anything back where they're ready to do anything, and I'm not sure what it is that, that's holding them back, but, if we don't guide what we want to show up there, I'm not unhappy with the Dollar General that we got there, but, I thought that worked out fairly well, but, I don't know what the next one to come down that everybody's gonna be unhappy with, but we ought to be trying to,
It's one of the things that's Dollar General I've ever
I mean, it's,
been. So I did have in Haddon, I go to Haddon, it's a rich area, dirtiest one I've ever seen. It's messy, it's disgusting.
well, when you need paper plates and napkins for.
Oh, that's right,
cake,
I got
so
two
that's the way to go.
I go to place, but.
Yeah, well,
So the other thing for a small single unit development that you could consider is when the town acquired using money from the open space fund, the Merit property, which is between Lake Road and the rail trail and 316, or correction, Route 6. And then on the other side of that, we bought that as multiple parcels. And the reason we did that is there's a parcel in there that we got them to donate. In other words, we paid a little bit more for the other with the open space funds and permanently deeded that. But there is a piece in there that's about, 25,000 square feet. It's in the commercial zone. The town owns it and there are no development restrictions on that. So if you ever had somebody who had a legitimate, and probably the smartest thing to do is put something that's trail-based business in there. You've got curb cut and, you've got the ability to develop that. So just keep that in mind.
And that's the stuff we need to identify, put out on paper, put on maps, so that developers realize that.
Yep, the other property that would have commercial potential is the property that's relatively easy to develop because it's fairly flat. And that is the property directly adjacent to the network group. Currently owned by the JAP group. Nobody knows quite how to get a hold of the JAP group because the LLC that controlled that was dissolved. The town was trying to collect taxes from them for quite a while. It will go into tax foreclosure this year. Probably in the next couple months, so if that's something that's of interest, be aware that that's a possibility. I don't know, but it's a pretty good parcel. A lot of it's wetlands, a lot of it's right by the river. The one stuff by Route 6 is highly developable. Certainly if the town owned it, probably the smart thing to do would be to buy it. Carve off the front part as commercial, and leave the rear in open space so the town can use it. But that's a possibility also.
Any other questions for the economic development team?
Nice job.
Oh, thanks.
So John, next up, you and your merry folks, craft that into a chapter like you did with the conservation one?
Absolutely. So I'm going to just throw on the screen a proposed schedule.
Just so you know, we are having a hard time here, at least I am. Yeah. I don't know if you can raise the volume on your mic there or not.
Okay, is that any better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All I needed to do was hold it less than 2 inches from my mouth, I guess. All right, I'm gonna just throw up a draft calendar sort of going forward, and the conversations had with Jed this week or last week indicated we would like to finish this off this calendar year ideally. And so what's best, because we have some public notification requirements associated with the public hearings of a plan of conservation and development, is to start from the end. And so looking back, working backwards from a presumed public hearing and adoption date. And so you need to have a public hearing before adoption. It could happen at the same meeting. So we'll schedule that. We'll again, and then we'll base this basically on our Planning and Zoning Commission schedule. So December would be the public hearing and adoption. Backing up, we basically need to give 2 months notice. So the actual finalizing of the drafts has to happen in October, and we'd post the notice with the town clerk and the state and the region at the October meeting, at which time we would ideally sort of say, okay, this is the plan that we're going to be working with. So then working back from there, September we would look at the implementation draft, including whatever additional maps we're going to be including, although most of the maps are going to be included in the various chapters like we did with conservation and complete streets. And then working back from September, basically set ourselves on a one chapter per meeting schedule, in which we would have the draft reviewed and sort of queue up the next draft. And I'm doing this in reverse order. So, but let's start where we are today, which is April. We'll review the conservation chapter, which had a number of edits, and we began the economic development discussion. We will write economic development draft ahead of the May meeting. So for your review in May, and then we'll begin our housing discussion, which is the next chapter. We'll review the draft of the housing chapter in June, begin the quality of life discussion. That chapter will be written in July or for July, then our resilience discussion, and then it's climate change and resilience. That draft would be reviewed in August, and then we would start the process of wrapping things up in the fall. But yeah, so basically, starting last month when we delivered the initial conservation chapter draft, we'll start knocking down these pins one by one into the fall. Does that make sense?
So when we first started the journey towards updating the plan of conservation and development, we had a schedule that was about April through December. And we've been working on it for a while now, a good year anyhow, and I think we've done an awful lot of good groundwork on it. And I think we got a couple of the tougher chapters. In pretty good shape, they're getting started, so. I was about ready to say, no, handwriting's on the wall, we're not gonna get it done this year. But I really didn't want to jeopardize any of the town's funding, by not having that thing done, they're tying grant money and all that kind of stuff, I don't know if they would tie all the, like the school money and that to it or not, but I said, gee whiz, it would really be nice if we had it done on time and not put the town in that predicament to say, but we're really close. At the same time, I like the way we've got started, is going, I think we're putting out a good quality product for what we've done so far. And I don't want to do that, and so that's a fairly aggressive schedule that John just showed you there, but I do think it's doable, and we ought to at least have that as a goal. So I don't want to get there and get anybody in trouble for not having our piece of that pie done. So that's,
And Jed, the one thing I would note is I don't think we're at any genuine risk of losing eligibility on state funds, particularly if we keep OPM well informed about our progress. And they understand that things slip sometimes. They in fact had a 5-year plan of conservation and development that wasn't written until the 4th year of that plan. So they have generally been willing to work with towns, particularly if they're demonstrating that they're working on the progress. But yeah, I think it'll just take a little bit of discipline on all of our parts. Obviously, ours to do the writing, and you guys to review and have comments ready for the meetings, and we'll proceed.
okay, thank you, John. Next up on the agenda, if anybody, I know we talked about questions for Elaine and Patrick. I can't remember if we got any or not, but
Yes, so with the economic development chapter, we're looking, there was talk of a number of parcels. You're looking at actually having a map embedded within the chapter that would identify those parcels for development.
Correct.
Okay.
That's, we wanna really get them identified as soon as possible,
Okay.
instead of just, oh, maybe someday.
Okay.
Well, then,
So my follow-up question to that then is the process you included, which was great, we'd love to see that. Coordinating with P and Z and Conservation Commission on what are the parcels that are more suitable. So the because we're all developing our chapters, we did our process, we didn't necessarily communicate with you, and you or you with us. So the process for how that occurs, so that, is that a sit down, is that a meeting of the planning and zoning? So we're looking at that and sort of saying, yeah, okay, yeah, that works, and that works, that one doesn't, or that works with these sort of considerations, so that your map dovetails with our map, there's synergies there.
so I think I'm kind of the ringleader on that effort, although I'm looking for the action item to show up in the EDC chapter, because that is our BOCD. But I kind of, I think we need to go almost parcel by parcel down Route 6 and say, what do we want to do here? Here's a nice piece of farm. What can we do to preserve it? Here's where some nice little businesses could go. This is currently zoned industrial, but might be better off business, because I think industrial, there's not the industries that they used to have for small little places. There's more. We're going to do a better job of getting little businesses than little industries, and so I'm looking to that to have probably a due date, not before we issue the report, because I think we've got a hard enough road to hoe to get the report done by the end of the year. but soon thereafter, we should be getting together and saying, nope, this is an area we want to conserve, nope, this is an area we want to develop, and have that discussion.
My question, Jed, is that, my concern is that if a map comes out separately from economic development,
Yep,
you know, we've got our one, I don't know if recreation's creating something, looking at, you know, particular trails, various other areas. They'll be without sort of in the process, if they're going to be in that document. Somewhere in this process of the preparation for the document, there should be some coordination so that we all agree that that's, that is this. Or if we have a disagreement, it's in that, it gets wrapped into the 10-year plan of how we resolve that type of thing.
so
Rather than have the plan come out,
Yep.
and then we have that meeting, we say, well, geez, that doesn't, that's kind of wrong.
we are fortunate enough that John, working with his team, has drafted both your chapter, and he's gonna be drafting the economic development chapter. And so he has an understanding of what we're trying to do there, and I think it's gonna probably come out right. If it doesn't, we'll find out at the next meeting when we see the chapter there, but
Will there,
Just as long
go ahead.
I was gonna say, we could always have a separate meeting, like a committee meeting, that way we could.
we've had a few
We
of
get
those.
the full size maps, because one of the other challenges is trying to view it on a computer screen, and it's challenging. And that's, you know, to have the full size maps or some way that we can both look, you know, your maps were incredible that are already been generated, but we don't really have EDC maps, other than what's already on the town books.
And that's another, thing that John with us has been working on, fairly, took a lot more time than I thought it was going to, is to get that computerized GIS product map so that it would be functioning for us as a zoning map.
We could do that now.
We could,
We can call up the parcel maps and go, I don't mean, at this meeting, we could do that.
Yeah.
You know, and say, look, what are these, is, you know, I guess, you know, there's multiple ways to do it, I'm just concerned that we come out with a document that we haven't sort of done that coordination around. So if the plan is that, you know, John's gonna put together these drafts, then it's the review process, it's like we reviewed the conservation chapter.
Yep.
But I didn't anticipate looking at the economic development chapter, or is there gonna be a review process that's broader? So it's not just economic development, looking at their chapter, you know, they can see our chapter, so that we can say, oh geez, this is a.
Yeah, it's really important, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, we should have joint committee meetings at the very least, or.
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
and it was my intention to
Yeah,
do that before January.
yeah,
But I thought we would be done with that whole project 6 months ago, and, we're not even ready to start having that conversation because we're trying to get streets of that on the map.
I don't actually think it will be, because the parcel maps. Agree that, you know, albeit that the CROG parcel map, still there's some funkiness in some of the lines, but that's sort of the standard that everybody's using right now. It would be in my view, it'd be pretty easy to put that up. We have our layers in GIS, we can call up layers and say, look, here's what's here for wetlands, here's what's here for endangered species, here's what's here for forests, sand and gravel deposits. It's a matter of what we don't know, is what you know is that this one is more suitable to this, you know, this would be great to develop, so we could sit down in a working session, figure out, yeah, that one works, this is great in these areas. So that when you're creating your map, you know that we're completely 100% supportive of those parcels. You know, it's not like there's for development, we agree on, because we're calling them out necessarily as we've identified, you know, undeveloped private properties, but we haven't said that should necessarily be preserved or that one over this one. So yeah, that guides that.
I think you should be thinking along the lines of those need to be preserved.
We are.
The ones we like.
Yeah, we have a sense of that based, but we are using our database of the natural resource inventory to guide our prioritization. So, but we're not coming out necessarily saying, because we want to see, that's more of a collaborative to say, because we recognize there's other values. So the question is, all right, how do we as a town figure out where those are the best parcels? Because there's two key questions, there's the where, and then there's also the how. So for example, in some of those parcels, we may have conservation values that are high, but if the development is done in a particular way, there's a synergy there. You know, and there's numerous cases that would fit that with parcels here. You know, and Eric mentioned one, you know, with that property that, was next to the network where, you know, you could potentially have the rear of it be conservation because of the wetlands and the proximity to the river. But the front end of it on the Route 6 thing can support development. And then it's a matter of the best development practices around wetlands, and it's a win-win. So, so it's sitting down and saying, okay, here's the ones, so that they can be mapped. And we know that using the information that we already have.
So you're using the GIS map as your base map.
Yes.
So if you can just use the GIS map as your base map, and everyone operates on the same as base map, you highlight the ones you want, you overlay them, and then we just talk about the ones that overlap in discussion, and then. If there's ones that you want and you have no environmental, then.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, here's my concern. We've spent a year getting one chapter done. In the next 6 months, we're gonna do 6 more. I am interested in capturing the action items, put into the plans, then we can go work on it. Otherwise, we'd have had this done 5 years ago. Why didn't we do it 5 years ago? You know, we've gotta get the plan done, and then the plan is gonna give us some actions that we go do. I would love to have all the actions done before we initiate the plan. But that's
That's
not the way it's working.
It's not how it works, I mean, this is
Yeah.
supposed to be for the next 10 years, this is what we're gonna be working on.
Right.
Okay, this is
And this
our, now
And
we're
this is
working our
a
action.
really good thing to go work on, I just don't think,
Cause
so
I
we
don't,
need to do
I
it
don't
right
think
now.
these maps need to be done for the PLCD.
So you-
They're to be done because of what we put in the PLCD.
Alright, so let me understand, so what you prefer a method where we have these individual maps. That you've identified areas that are important for economic, you feel are important for economic development. We've identified areas that are for conservation areas. We put this plan together. That has these goals and objectives associated with these. And then you would then take that, so that's the plan.
Yep.
That the state would see,
Yep.
and others would see. And then over that 10-year period,
That's when we
you would vet those different ones.
turn it.
Well, and I think it would be a lot quicker than over that 10-year period. But I don't think we can go quick enough to get it done between now and the end of the year.
So,
Don't you?
so we have a map, a GIS overlay. That has all the, what the Conservation Commission has identified.
We have mapped the natural resources.
Okay.
And we have mapped the existing open space. And we've mapped the parcels that are undeveloped.
Okay,
So those are the elements that can be used to make recommendations about parcels that you want to develop, or they're used for various land use practices.
so, and you guys presumably have a map that shows which parcels or which areas you think support what type of development, whether higher density residential or, you know, commercial.
We don't have a physical maps,
But
we
you
just,
have.
we have ideas.
So you can.
That's- yeah.
Use.
Okay, so
Yeah,
what
we have ideas,
happens,
of what kind of
so-
development we wanna see,
if,
where the development's gonna
Well,
go.
how many of these things have we had in the last 5 years where we've had to even discuss it? How many times has somebody come up and said, I want to develop this property on Route 6? And there's never been that discussion. You know, I think we can wait till January to do it right. I'm concerned about if we try to squeeze that in now. I don't have the bandwidth to do it, you know, and it's my POCD, I gotta be able to, you know, only drive the bus as fast as I'm capable of driving the bus.
Yeah.
You know, and I look at, when we look at that schedule that John put out, I'm looking at any minute. The gravel pit could bite us in the butt and take us full time. Any minute. You know, Mr. Fitch put in his request for agro-tourism thing, and then we're on the clock to get that done, and that's gonna be a priority. you know, I've been trying to get. There's a guy on Lake Road who wants to turn his house from a 3-season to a year round. I've been trying to get him to come in and talk to the commission so I can at least figure out what regulatory changes we do before he drops that, and we're on the clock for that one. But I know there's gonna be permits that are gonna come in, and it's gonna take everything I got to deal with that. And I'm not gonna be able to deal with the P O C D to get it where I wanted to go. And I've got, you know, I wanna do a good job. I think we've got the vision now that we didn't have a year ago. That we need this group session to go look first parcel by parcel to do that. And I think we can even extend it down 316 because we got some nice historic houses there that I think would be, you know, could be turned into a bed and breakfast or a restaurant or professional building or some stuff like that. But I just don't think I have the ability to get that where you're looking, and I know exactly where you want to go, Hank, and I'm committed to going there. I just can't do it right now.
And my concern is we don't get there.
Okay,
That once you've got maps that identify economic development, you got maps that are separate from
So,
conservation.
let me stop there, because we've been working, you know, one of the things that I told Jim, you're not gonna retire until this map is done. Okay, you're retired now, map's not done, and we're halfway there, you know, we have not even talked about what's the best use of the land. That I thought was gonna be finishing that up, and we've been working on that for 6 or 8 months now, just to get it to the point, and I'm stopping that effort. Until we get done with the P O C D, and then we're gonna take that map and talk about the best use for the different parcels.
And then is the P O C D amended, or is it?
No, that's one of the action items in the P O C D is to have that meeting and
Yeah.
create.
Yeah, what I would suggest if you're gonna do that is that you make a plan right up front. That you're gonna adopt additional mapping as an addendum to the P O C D. And you leave an actual blank in the P O C D,
Okay,
which
yeah,
is
we'll
what
do
we did
that.
last
So-
time.
Yep,
Mr. Chair?
With like the complete streets plan and a few other things.
Yeah.
We didn't get it in time when we put the P O C D, but we then had a plan to come back and do an amendment to the P O C D, and that's okay.
yep, and it should be just written out as an action, and then, yeah, the idea of a placeholder in there is great, but. But I do expect that we're gonna hop on that soon. I think it's a really great thing to do. I just think that getting the P O C D done is a really great thing to do too. And that one's got, you know, that's a requirement.
Cause we need to know what we're going to market
Yes.
to developers as.
And that's
This
not
will
gonna
be
be
a
an
good
easy.
spot for this kind of development, and if you were interested in doing that kind of development, come take a look at what we've
And
done.
that's not gonna be an easy conversation, because the Conservation Commission and the Economic Development Commission have different.
Right,
Goals.
that's why to me it's an essential piece, is that, you
Yeah.
know, me too, it is a plan of conservation and development, so that's why you have. And that's, to me, my experience is that's the process that never happens.
Okay.
And then
So,
end up
Jeff-
with- on the other side is, just like you said, you'll start going out, marking properties, and things will stack there. And then it becomes this, instead of this.
I think the
It's a
first,
fun thing.
the first step.
So I
to get
hear
ready
you about
for
the
that-
resources, so.
The first step to get ready for that, the Conservation Commission needs to go say, these are the properties that we're really excited about. And then Economic Development needs to do the same before we go and start talking that together.
So if I might, Jed, I think what you're talking about, and if I'm hearing it correctly, I think what we're talking about is possible, and it's something that we will plan to do as part of the full draft of the plan. You know, each chapter obviously establishes its own priorities, and we'll work with economic development over the next month to identify either specific parcels or parcel criteria that will identify, you know, sort of key development areas, obviously along Route 6, maybe key intersections, maybe key crossings of the Hop River Trail, that sort of thing. We will, you know, and so we will create a map of, you know, maybe high potential economic development parcels. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap with conservation because we're dealing with the Route 6 corridor. But that draft will be part of the economic development chapter. As we get towards the end, when we do the implementation, and I noted implementation and mapping for I think our September or October meetings, there will be what we would call a future land use map. That is, the attempted Hegelian synthesis, right, of conservation and development. And obviously, we're not going to nail every parcel down to say this one's conservation, this one's development, that one's development, this one's conservation. But it will be our best shot at synthesizing those goals while reinforcing the criteria that makes them attractive for one reason or another. But there will be a map. We will produce a future land use map that will attempt. And again, not everyone's going to agree, and it'll be ultimately up to the commission to kind of use their wisdom and all of the input that's provided to do the best estimate on that blend. And we would call it a future land use map, and ideally adopt it with the rest of the plan in December, and then spend the next several years hacking away.
Okay, so that was a short answer to a good question. And probably not as short, well, probably not like the live here, but
That's
yeah. I'm struggling to get that ball.
What I heard was we have to have a lot of combined meetings.
We have-
Like over these areas and these maps and
And we have
ideas.
already had a fair number of those.
Yeah.
And get done with, where we are now.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Just do
You
yourself
know,
a
I-
favor, use the same, whatever they're already using, just do yourself a favor, use the same one starting out. When you start, even if it's just notes for yourself, just use the same one starting out, it'll make your life a thousand times
what's
easier.
really gonna happen if somebody wants to come and develop one of these pieces of property, we got 3 of them for sale. And then they're gonna come in and tell us what they'd like to do, and we're gonna try and guide them in the right direction to get, whatever everybody wants there, but right this minute. There has not been a abundance of properties even for sale, but right now we got 3 of them. It'd be nice to figure out what would we like to do with those. So if any of those 3 properties, hey, you got, no, we need to conserve it, let us know, and we'll figure out, okay, so how are we gonna go get the money to buy that, work with Josh Food Trust, whatever.
Well, I would like to see a map that comes out that shows properties that the development's focused on. Because as John talked about the matrix, we have a whole, we did a natural resource inventory.
Yep.
Invested a lot of effort into putting that together. It has a variety of data layers, and that should be used as one of those tools in evaluating the properties. We should be making decisions based on data.
We'll do a working session.
Yeah.
So that's, we can certainly apply our layer to that and say, here's the potential challenges associated with it.
Okay, yep, and if these guys want to get together and have some of those discussions now, but
Was I
Already-
John's?
we're already a couple of months later to get to this discussion point that I was hoping we were gonna be. It's just the way it goes, and but John's told me his team is not gonna be the bottleneck, it's gonna be you planning and zoning guys, so we're gonna have to do whatever it takes to get there. Right, John?
That's right. And it's
What's that? If we do, yep, and that's why, John came with the schedule to try to get us to the finish line on time. Let's not buy into the fact that, no, we're gonna be a month or 2 late. Let's do it right, and if we need to get more meetings, then, that's what we need to do. But right this minute, we need more chapters to go first, and then we'll schedule a meeting. But I don't anticipate that we're gonna be able to get through with 1 meeting a month to get to the finish line. Something's gonna happen, and that's just the way it is. We'll do what we can, and if somebody comes and wants to develop a property, I know Hank, you will be there with us to be the little Jiminy Cricket on our shoulder to make sure that we're doing the very best we can for all that.
Our commission.
Is that
Our commission
Yeah, right, yep. So, okay, well, Hank, I think it's time for your nickel now.
I'm gonna just turn it over, I think I set it up, I'm gonna turn it over to Mary.
Oh, okay. Mary Ann,
Okay,
yours.
hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes,
That's wrong, but we can hear you.
okay, I'll get closer. Okay, the group has spent a month or so going over the draft chapter that was provided. And we had a lot of thoughts on it. We did some editing. We sent along some additional photos to be added. And I sent it along, well, we sent the link to John and Jed. Did you two both get a chance to look at it?
Yes, I did it and I forwarded it out, and maybe John did as well, I can't remember, but, everybody on the commission has had a chance to see the update.
Okay, so I don't think we changed anything substantially, but we did make quite a few revisions. So, it's a lot to go through, so I don't think we'll go through the whole chapter, but, we would like to know if you had any questions or concerns.
So I noticed, and you had the question in the draft. It was where it was talking about the amount of open space in Connecticut. And I think it might have said that 76% of Connecticut is open space or something.
Right, yeah, we weren't sure about that
And-
number.
And I thought that can't be true. Can it be true? 76% of our state is open space? No.
It might be undeveloped, but it's not protected.
So we just need to clarify in the draft chapter what that number means.
I think that reference, that the state's goal was 21% of the state by 2024, which they didn't hit. And that was open space that the state would be purchasing, but also towns and land trusts, so it was not just the state. I think the reference from that 76 that was in the chapter really talked about, it was really that 76, they've hit 76% of the goal. So I think it was trying to, and John, you guys wrote this. Yeah, I think it was reflecting more of that, why Andover's contributions is, is the state's trying to hit goals. There's an importance to Andover's contributions, or as is other towns addressing some of these goals. Sorry.
Yeah, it was 76%, I believe. Was it Andover's open space that was provided for or accounted for by the state, and the remainder was town and private, I think was the statistic.
In the sentence that's on page 11, says as of December 2022, Connecticut Deep and its conservation partners protected an estimated 515,000 acres, or 76.6% of open space across the state. So of the open space, I guess they're saying that we protected 76% or something.
Probably 76% of their goal for open space.
Yeah, it says. Okay, I can double check and just make sure that that's the correct number.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's what you have is 76% of of the state's stated goal. Yeah, that's what that statistic is calling out.
Okay, I got it.
So the state is 3/4 towards its established goal.
And I was interested, I did not see a draft that had the new pictures that you sent out in. And my technical
No.
skills didn't allow me to see the new pictures that were going in, so I, eagerly looking forward to seeing the draft that has all the new pictures that you took in it.
Yeah.
Are you saying you didn't see I didn't put
Yeah,
the
we
pictures in the document.
we haven't incorporated it. That's sort of final layout stuff. We haven't incorporated the photos. We got them, Marianne, but yeah, we haven't sort of finalized the draft and cleaned it all up. The text is more important right now.
Yes, well, that's what we figured. So yes, they're not in there yet. They just need to be placed strategically, like the pollinator, the pollinator garden here, where we talk about the pollinator garden and, some of the water views where we talk about the water quality.
I've just been looking at what we did receive. You've got pictures labeled Andover Farmers Market, but that's not our Andover Farmers Market. I think that was from Massachusetts, actually.
We removed those pictures in the draft.
Right.
So we sent some pictures, but they shouldn't have included the farmer's market. There were pictures of some farmer's market in the draft, and they've been X'd out in the draft that we sent back. We wanted to remove the farmer's market photos.
Yeah, we were able to see the comments. We just haven't gone through and removed those pictures yet. Sorry, the light just turned off in the room I'm in because they're motion censored.
Okay, so does that answer your question about the market pictures?
Yeah.
Okay. And while we're mentioning the market, I did rewrite it a little in that the market is officially on a hiatus. It wasn't in progress last year, and then I couldn't find any reference anywhere to any plans to do it this year. So I just mentioned, I updated that because the original text talked about it as an ongoing venture, which it currently is not, to my knowledge.
Yeah, Ryan Fitch would like to do the farmer's market at his property.
Is that for 2025?
He's trying 2025, but more like 2026.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
no, he's, and since we are not, the town itself, we're not doing it. We don't have anybody to do it, and we saw it as EDC members as kind of an agritourism thing.
Yep.
And said, it's fine, if you want to, on your property, do a farmer's market.
Right, and and the other thing, there was a food share, some sort of co-op mentioned. I don't have the draft open in front of me. But none of the commission members, the Conservation Commission members, were familiar with that particular organization. Is that still current and in business? Is that still ongoing? Someone can verify that?
Share and food pantry in the town of Andover. Food share is 1 day a week. Will be Tuesdays.
No, I'm sorry, not the food share. There was some organization with a picture of a farm.
Is it the Our Farm, Our Food LLC? I think
No, that is not. That was never actually located on that road.
yeah, we were told, so we'll remove that.
Okay. All right, yeah, if you could remove that, because we didn't think that was a thing.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments at this point? And I had, a couple, once we got, so on page 22, right before the goals, there's a couple of, paragraphs. One is about the CART program, and the other is about recycling efforts with a composting program. And I didn't see anything in the action items that took those thoughts and made them an action for anybody.
Well, we're open to suggestions. That the Conservation Commission is not in charge and does not run the CART program. So we'd have to have someone from CART or
Okay, see what
give
you're saying.
feedback.
I'm with Cart, what do you wanna know?
Well, it says we need to increase it. Small stuff.
Increase it.
Andover should continue to maintain and expand its efforts to reduce, reuse, and recycle. The CART program
The cart problem is just for returnables.
collects bottles and cans.
Yeah, we're just the returnable
Yep.
bottles and cans.
Okay.
Unless, the only thing is, I did a little reading on it. When I was on Sustainable CT, they talked about, there's lots of other things you can recycle. One of the ones was mattresses, that a lot of towns recycle old mattresses. So I don't know if we even have the space for it, but that is the sort of thing that could be considered an expansion.
Well, that's all part of the transfer station and its programs, right? That's the transfer station, Eric's for that. Yeah, this cart is just collecting Andover's returnable treasures, is what Eric stands for.
Okay, no,
And we're just
If there's
taking
no action
everybody's
there,
bottles and
yep.
cans and we're taking the money and
Here's-
splitting it up among the 4 organizations that do it.
So as we started reviewing the current P O C D to figure out where to go. There were a lot of great thoughts in that P O C D, and that's all they stayed at was great
Great
thoughts.
thoughts.
Because nobody was assigned the action, nobody was
Yeah.
responsible for
Yeah.
it. And trying to do better on that process this
Yeah.
time around.
Yeah.
So,
It wouldn't be a terrible idea to identify in the P O C D in the conservation chapter. A goal of incorporating an organics recycling program. We know the municipal waste stream statewide, somewhere around 30% of the total household trash.
Yep, I think that's the very follow-on paragraph in here, that talks about Andover should consider sponsoring the composting program at the transfer station, use organics, mentoring the waste stream, you know. It's, I think it's a great thought, it's just, somebody needs to do it, you know, and so, because 10 years from now, we're gonna look at that great thought, and who did that? And even if we're assigned action, it's very clear, we got a 50-50 chance of getting it done, so. So that was my thought in there. And that was really, you know, when I guess, so I looked through, you know, when we did the discussion on the action items before, and it said, for instance, amend ARD 5.5.7.5 to replace 75% with 100% of wetland acreage removed from calculating a building lot allowances for sites. I said, that's easy, all I have to do is cross off 75, write 100, we're good to go, on to the next one. And I said, wow, is that what we want to do? You know, and again, we don't have a lot of experience with that because we haven't had any of these big subdivisions to put in, so I always knew when I was reading the instructions that I don't know what that really, how that's gonna work. But I'm not sure, but I know I'm not smart enough to base changing it when the prevailing thought is that we don't have developers beat down the door to come build here because we're too hard to work with.
Well, I was gonna just ask that exact question that you asked, I'm not sure.
I could probably ask it better because.
Well, no, I think you just pretty much asked it, but I was gonna ask the same thing, is it really necessary and is it really advisable if it's already at 75%? Is it necessarily even practical to make it 100%?
Yeah, and I don't know, and without having to, you know, because we haven't gone through an example, I don't even know how to start making that assessment.
What is it?
But it sounds, I understand it sounds good from a conservation perspective, we want to conserve more. But
But I think,
if we conserve too much, nobody's gonna come build, we're gonna conserve it all by default, because nobody's gonna come here and do it.
and it says somewhere in here that the town is already at 23% of open space versus 21%.
Yep.
So I think, not that we don't. You know, it's a relatively small town geographically anyway, compared to a lot of other towns in Connecticut, and I think. You know, we should keep proportion in mind, especially with the kind of question that you and I are just talking about now, while. You know, Mary Ann and Hank are here.
Yep.
Was
And
that
so-
number protected open space or just?
Roman numeral B5.
Because we did have a lot.
That's the very first of the zoning ones. And the
Okay.
second one's similar, it says. You replace 40% with 50% is the minimum amount of open space set aside required.
Okay,
For a conservation perspective, sure, that sounds good. But is that really what we want? I think. it's another one of those things that we could probably talk about a lot before we issue the plan. And I know on the current plan, you know, the thing, the plan talked about going from R80 to R40. And we ended up at R60. And, you know, so there was some compromise in there. I understand the thought, but I think that's gonna be where we get the tension with the economic development, because, you know, we're not bursting at the seams with economic development yet either. It's, it'll kind of nothing all out, so I don't know what the roadblock is for getting these guys to come in and wanna work here in Andover. But the result is that people like Andreas, who are on a very small road, want nice and quiet, are getting exactly what they want, and that's what 90% of the town wants. Right, so that's
Well, I do know, I mean, when I was marketing 162 acres for several years. Whatever developers looked at, just, it was too much ledge. It was too much work to build in there. It was gonna cost them too much. So they're gonna go out and find a flat property that doesn't have ledge.
Yep.
And that's where they're gonna put their stuff. So I mean, you know, there's just,
yeah, so, yeah, I think part of it is we have to
not great land to build.
work in trying to figure out how to find spots that we can develop and
Right.
you know, bring them in here, but
Which
But
one?
so,
That's six.
I understand what the Conservation Commission is driving to, and I agree with it from a conservation perspective. I'm not sure I agree with it from the town perspective, yeah, and we don't have to agree with it, we got till December to really do that, and it may be, again, it's an action after the P O C D is issued for us to go off and do. I would like to have it all actions that the planning and zoning commission agreed we wanted to do before we put it in there. But if we miss some, you know, it's way to go.
Yeah, from the Conservation Commission perspective, unlike the maps, which I think were a different optic.
Yeah.
The recommendations that we provided regarding regulatory changes and so forth were intended not as, when you put that in the P O C D, it's set in stone, that's not, you can't do that, I mean, you have to follow a process for regulatory change. Was just saying, these are recommendations that we have to protect the resources that we've identified. And then the process, the action item going forward, in the case of, for example, the wetland regs, would be to work with the Wetlands Commission and follow the regulatory process for review and figuring out where you want to go with the regulatory changes. So those are very process oriented, but they're a little different than sort of identifying parcels up front and putting them in.
Yes, it is, it's no doubt about it, and the last one that I'll mention is just it's a wetlands one, and so we're taking. So the first wetlands is to areas of special concern to include cold water streams and vernal pools. I said, okay, that's yeah, I think that's probably the right thing to do.
What's a cold water stream?
I don't know the answer to that one. It's got cold water.
So cold water
the
streams are
Go
mapped
swimming in
by-
it, you get cold.
They were identified by the DEP based on the characteristics they have. In essence, they're cold water. So they generally have a more forested edge so that they're not warmed up. And they support things like brook trout, a variety of organisms that you can't have in non-cold water streams. The water quality in streams, when they start to get warmer, declines. So they're very interested in protecting cold water streams because of the wildlife and the water quality standpoint. So the other aspect of them is because of climate change, they're very vulnerable. We're seeing significant declines in stream quality, increases in temperatures, loss of species like brook trout, things like that. So for example, the Hop River stream right now is considered a cold water stream. If you talk to any of the fisheries folks at the DEP, it's right on that edge of whether it can hold support brook trout. So depending on decisions made in Columbia, Andover, and Coventry, along that system will determine whether that system stays like that for watershed system. And likely whether DP would continue to stop the drought, things like that. So there's various, so it's identifying, if you were to look at a lot of state goals, it identified things like vernal pools, flow water streams, core forests as important for a variety of reasons. That are some germane to wildlife, some germane to water quality, some germane to maintaining buffering water temperature, flood sewers, things like that. So that's what flow water streams are.
So things like
Burnett Brook.
the Setauket River, the Connecticut River, are those, they're
Well,
not.
Connecticut River's not a cold water stream. So it would be Setauket, Burnett Brook's an excellent example of a cold water stream. It's got a lot of oxygen, it's got a lot of forest around it, but depending on how development goes along Burnett Brook, would determine whether it would remain a cold water stream.
So the last action I'll ask for your perspective on, again for the wetlands, says expand the upland review area, including cold water streams and vernal pools to 300 feet from 200. And so I know we had talked at the wetlands meeting the other night about the fact that it was only like yesterday that people, didn't know they had a vernal pool, didn't care about a vernal pool, were cutting down trees and all that, you're right to the edge of the vernal pool. And so my thought was, if we kept that at 200 feet, that's a tremendous improvement over what we've been doing. And did we really need to go to 300 feet on those?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can certainly explain. In fact, one of the documents that we provided is for all the recommendations that we made. We have an annotated document that goes through what the regulation is now, what the recommended change is, including the wording and the justification for it.
Okay, yeah.
So if you read that document, you see our justification. So in that case, the science tells us now that 300 feet is important for protecting against what we call edge effects. And that's based on research. So edge effects are when you do a development, you have what's called a development footprint. So it's the area that you're disturbing and developing. And obviously that's disturbance. But the effect of that development, and it can be agriculture, it can be a commercial development, a housing development, it can be a trail, depends on, and they will have, depending on the type of development or activity, they will have an extended impact of distance into the surrounding environment. So we now know, and that's been studied, there's a body of literature that's looked at that over the years and looked at the effects on soil, looked at invasive species spread, a variety of different things. So basically, what we now know is we look at that 300 feet. So for example, if you look at the DEP's website, or if you look nationally, you'll see they call, and we map core forests in Connecticut. There's actually a map for Connecticut. So we can look at what's been mapped as core forest in Andover. And the core forest is based on forest that is at least, the edge is at least 300 foot distant from non-forest area, because the effects can bleed in up to 300 feet within that forest. So what the 300 feet gives you is based on what we now know, and it allows you, it's not an exclusion zone, just like the existing 200 feet is. It's basically a review area to be able to look at and assess what the potential impacts of a particular land use will be, whether it's removal of trees, increase impervious surface, whatever it is. So it provides you an opportunity to have a better review on what the impacts might be associated with those.
Okay,
So that's why.
there was no doubt in my mind you had done your homework.
So, you know, you
You're
can
much better than I done all that, which is why I go on.
Would be restrictive of roads or driveway?
It would be restricted as nothing. The 300 feet is a review area, unlike a setback.
Yeah.
So one of the recommendations we made associated with the Hop River system is to look at identifying the Hop River as an overlay zone or something along that line, which you can do in Connecticut. And allows you to then look at and put in things like setbacks, where you may have a 50 foot or 100 foot setback, which would be more of an exclusion, so you can't cut trees within 100 feet of a wetland.
Right.
Right now, the way our wetlands regs are, we have, it's 100 feet around any wetlands, it's a review area. That means that if you're doing a regulated activity within that, you need to go before wetlands and seek a permit for it. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you need to assess that and get a permit. With a step in our existing regulations of wetlands, they identified back in 2015 a list of wetlands and water courses that were of special priority. So they upped it to 200 feet. Basically saying we need more review around these because they're sensitive. We value these because of what they are, and the lake, so forth. So what we're saying is, yes, that's right. We think you should add a couple more into that based on the challenges that these systems face now. And not reduce any of the other ones, because that logic held true. But you should also reflect the new science and increase it to 300 feet. So that's the logic behind it.
Okay, I have no other questions for the Conservation Commission tonight. How about you guys?
I hear all these things, but I feel like what you said is, it's difficult enough to get development and things right now. And putting all this in is gonna make it even harder. I know you'd wanna conserve, but I also feel like we need to do some development.
I don't think
Put
there's a
somebody
developer
wants
out
it.
there that would have a problem with just viewing the property and not wanting to destroy the environment, you know what I mean? And most developers, if they want to make sure they're not damaging things.
And the conservation commission is gonna be consulted on every development.
Absolutely.
There's gonna be a lot of collaboration come out.
And in every application, it's gotta be,
There's so many
it goes,
things.
I thought it was a proposal on to have it reviewed.
Yeah, but look,
There's that,
time out there.
thank you, all right.
Because I do not wanna be in, what we wanna avoid is this.
Yeah.
So the reason, I'll get on my hires. The reason you put the effort into the plan, and I recognize that it's hard and it takes time, and it rarely actually happens. But the reason you do that is so you have a strategic approach that your commissions agree on, that are moving forward on, vision for the town. Not just something that you pick out each one, this parcel, that parcel, it's a strategic vision that you can go forward with, so when people come in, it doesn't become this.
Right.
It becomes, you know, and believe me, the developers, everybody else will get that and understand that. What they take advantage of is when you don't.
Don't have it,
Yeah.
exactly,
And right now, we don't have that.
yeah.
We've got some good regs, we've got some good policies, we've got the meat of it, we have it, we need to pull a lot of that together. This is the plan to do it, because it gives you what it should be.
Yeah.
As a 10-year action plan for all your commissions. Conservation commissions going forward, working within the wetlands to review those and determine what's the best approach. And you're right, it is a compromise, but unless you do that, you're gonna end up like this. It's gonna be, all right, somebody wants to come in and develop 162 acres in Lugano, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, a week, they're already got an application in, so they're already wanting to go. We find out about it, we get, everybody's like this.
Yeah.
It's not the way, and what ends up happening, guess which side loses? Guess which side loses in all those equations?
Every side.
Both. No,
No,
the conservation side always loses on those equations. Because nobody put in place, everybody gets nervous about the 300 feet of these, and the conservation side will keep whittling down and down, and we lose what we have. And make no mistake, those systems out there, even though we're blessed with an abundance of resources, they are already under indexed. It's not that they're not. We park our school buses next to the Hot River. We store our sand next to the Hot River. We have lots of development along the Hot River. We have a major road, 6 along the Hot River. They're already under it.
We're actively trying to move it out of there.
No, I'm not being, I don't want to come across as accusatory. What
Yeah,
I'm trying to say is, we don't want the next 25 years to be added to that.
right,
And it doesn't have to be, there's a lot of these things that easily could be dealt with if they were planned for upfront. But won't be dealt with if not for upfront. And that's been my experience. So I think that.
Cause that would be,
It's-
I mean, with that plan, that information and conservation involved with it. Then that would be another push that we could have to move public works out by the transfer station. You know what I mean? You know, looking at the properties, looking at the land and saying, where would be a better place to be storing this sand that's all have these trucks?
You know, to me, that's almost like that would be fantastic, but to me, that's almost a bridge. We're still at that stage of
Yeah.
understanding what we have
Yeah,
and putting it together and saying, okay, how do we integrate the economic development goals? Those goals that I saw you guys lay out were fantastic.
yeah.
They were, when I sit here as a resident of Andover, they seem like the right goals, and as a conservationist, I only wrote down a couple of notes of, okay, here's the areas we have to really think about and coordinate. And it's the same, but recreation, same thing, but unless we do, that's why I was arguing about, unless we do this, you're gonna come out with maps.
Yeah.
We're coming out with maps, we're not gonna, and we're gonna say, okay, down the road, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
And Jed's right, we need to have an action plan, we need to have it, but we need to hold our feet to the fire on doing that, and the problem is it doesn't fit neatly in the structure. You know, we'll go back and we'll have our conservation commission meeting and talk about things, and if we see something come up in P and Z or in the wetlands, we'll go, oh, we gotta weigh in on that, but that gets you this, because it's already in process. Versus knowing that, okay, we've already thought about where the development's going, we're not so much worried about that.
Yeah.
You know, we can take on these other challenges and be more proactive with landowners and things like that. But unless we do that planning effectively on the front end, we won't get there. Or our chances of getting there are not.
This, I echo that. I work at Pratt only, I do a lot of, process engineering. And the key thing is preparation. So I'm all for what he's saying. I think we just have to make the effort to get together, lay it with maps, see what we're dealing with, develop a plan, and we can work to that with action items. We call it goal and action item list, right? That we can work towards. So, yeah, I think I agree with you.
Okay, well, I think we spent, Ann, did you have something else?
This
you
is,
wanted to
maybe
say?
it's a silly question, but on the draft you gave us, all these maps are just little tiny things, are they gonna be full size? Like this size in the final production, or are they gonna be little tiny?
Here's the thing, the value of those maps, those were inserted as sort of examples of the types of data we looked at. The value of those is putting those in a GIS system,
Okay,
which ours are in, so,
yeah,
and layering them, so when you look at a parcel, for example, or you look at a particular area of town.
yeah.
You can
okay.
say, okay, what do we have here from, in our project, natural resources? On your perspective, it's coming in economic development. On Eric's perspective, it might be key infrastructure like a
I'm
whole.
just wondering if they're gonna be in the plan too.
Not all of those is, there will be subsets of those that will help tell the story that
All right, thank
Jenny
you.
Hill and John's crew are working on, they were in that draft. We had a separate meeting recently, to talk about those and make some modifications to those. What I'm arguing for is using the data and those maps in a layering process with what Elaine, and their group has. So that you're basically using information to
Yeah.
make
I understand.
considerations.
So you're talking about using them, but not showing them in this.
If we're not gonna use the map that's in the POCD, we're gonna go to the GIS database and be able to blow it up, shrink it down, whatever you want. See all the information. you want.
For the most part, the maps inside the document are going to be mostly illustrative, you know, and to do descriptive. You know, the policy stuff will be, there'll be maybe a couple of larger scale policy maps, but mostly it'll be sort of an ongoing basis through the GIS.
Okay, I think that, anything else for the conservation chapter? John, you ready to go, take?
Yep,
the next one?
we'll make the edits to conservation, and we'll be drafting economic development.
Okay, excellent.
And then, John, you'll send us, once you've made the edits, you'll send us the new drafts so we can look over it again.
At this point, we'll send it to everybody, as you know, as the draft. Yeah.
And before Mary Ann drops off the screen here, I just want to thank you for, joining me with the at the Finance Committee public hearing there. And we did get an awful lot of funding added back in.
Oh, you did?
My thought was, when we were done, if whoever made the motion to put 10,000 in said 25, they would have passed it at that point, so.
Well, that was my
Well,
plan. I tried with the money. I said, it doesn't have to be 50, just put some money in. So that's great.
So thank you. Okay. We're gonna move on to the next item and which would be discussion on status of proposed changes in zoning map and zone changes. I think we beat that more than I want to talk about anymore, so we're gonna move on to the exciting discussion of bylaws changes. And John's got that, we're gonna put it up on the screen. I think it's gonna go. Hopefully this can be fairly quick. I have not run these through.
Thanks, Hank. Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks for putting up with me.
Love that passion, Hank.
Be back.
Um, so what we're seeing is a small portion. Eric, can you make that bigger, or is that gonna be from John's end, that it would have to get bigger than that to do?
I'll zoom in.
Oh, we're
I'll
getting
zoom
there,
in.
okay. Super, okay, so,
Let me know where to go.
on the first page, there were no changes from what's been there before, so.
Thanks, Elaine.
Anyway. Moving to the first red change there, yep, and it says officers of the commission shall consist of a chairperson and vice chairperson duly elected pursuant to Article 7, which talks about the election of officers. And so, a comment that came in just to provide, where's the talk about that, and put that in there, so it changes nothing that we've been doing. And that's it for page 2. Oops. I'm sorry, down at the bottom. We deleted the board clerk shall be a salaried employee of the town, because I don't think she is.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we crossed that line out. Moving on, what's that?
What does that mean?
Well. All I can tell you is that the board clerk is not a salaried employee of the town, and so. She's a union employee, so we figured we would cross out the requirement that we weren't following.
I forget the term, but contractor.
Is she an independent contractor?
Yeah.
So she's not a salary employee of the town, so
Yeah.
that would be really nothing, just paid by the meeting that she. Per diem.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyhow, it doesn't affect what we're doing. Going on to page 3. So under section 2B4, it used to say copy of summary ruling and proof of mailing. And we don't do summary rulings. And so we came up with a different term there, notice of approval or denial. That's what Jim creates for us when we're getting ready to vote on things and approve applications and that sort of thing. Wetlands does summary rulings. I probably plagiarized that right out of theirs when I was writing this copy and wasn't smart enough to know the difference. There are a couple of differences between wetlands in here.
So is that the word certified later on in the
Certified is, we deleted that too, proof of mailing, so there's a new process now where, well, essentially. Certified signed receipt is too hard anymore, the mailman never finds anybody at home when they're trying to deliver mail. And so a lot of places have gone, and this has been, discussed with Attorney Grants, and he's he agrees with it, that we get proof of mailing, we dropped it off at the post office acknowledges receipt, and then, that's as much as we get.
With a receipt.
With receipt, yep, so, for instance, when we, were talking about the package that we were supposed to have gotten last July for the cell tower out there at Hearst Farm. I tried to pull the string on, okay, who signed for those? And there is no signing, the only proof that, the attorney had that, he had sent it to us was he had something from the post office saying he delivered it there. I don't know what happened, after they got to the post office. But I certainly wasn't, I couldn't convince myself that they came here either, you know. I talked to a friend of mine who's on the wetlands over in, Hebron, and he never got a copy of the thing either, so I don't know what happened, but we didn't get a cell tower package when it came out.
So does that mean that the responsibility for actually receiving it is less definitive?
Yes,
We still have a record with a receipt from the
Yeah.
post office, but
and I'm probably way beyond my level of knowledge on there, Jim, if you can help me out on that, I'd be happy to listen to anything you wanna say, even though we're not paid.
Well, I think you covered it well. The problem is, I mean, people don't pick up certified, first of all, you have to go to the post office. So if you get a notice in the mail saying you're to the post office, you gotta be work, the next day early, a lot of times. A lot of people don't, most certified mail is something you don't want, so they don't go get it. And then,
there you go.
then from an office standpoint, if you have all these green cards flying around, they're just hard to keep track of. And it doesn't matter because the law changed, the statute changed. And it's proof of mail, or certification of mail, that.
At least the sender has proof of sending it.
Yeah, that, he's got that,
Right, with that, with the overlay.
Yep.
It is a pain, there's a lot of paperwork.
It is.
involved with it. But
and it's not surprising.
Sometimes you get 3, 5, 7, sometimes you have 30.
And the other thing about the requiring return receipts, there's still times when I require send stuff out and. Do that, is that. You often don't get the rejection back for like a month or 6 weeks, and that's longer than it takes to have the first public hearing. So I've had one where I've gotten 5 of the green cards back for butters. And there's 2 that I have no idea what the status is, and then 4 weeks later, I get the mail returned to me. But it's too late to do anything anyway, so I don't think it gains you anything, is what I'm saying. So I think this is correct.
So I'm just asking if, so if that's the way it's done now. So there is some burden of proof. That at least the town took something to the post office.
Yeah.
Yes, and we still put up the signs, and we still put the notice in the newspaper. So there's a fairly significant effort to get the word out to anybody who's interested.
Okay, thanks.
What all people have to do is not pick up the mail. Very simple.
Yep.
But they don't wanna get that little grain newspaper.
So they just don't. Okay,
Moving down to the bottom there, just above section 3, it talks about the added, mainly correspondence, to, what the land use administrative system does. Under zoning enforcement office, we added responsibility, assist the general public with interpretation of land use regulations. And assist with completeness of applications, and I think that's what, Jim has spent a good deal of his time doing. And, we wanted to recognize that as one of his. On to page 4. Roman numeral 6, prepare with the assistant chairperson a draft motion and conditions of approval. That's something that Jim works with me on before we're getting ready to go to the meeting on an application.
You might even say. A draft motion and conditions of approval and or
and or denial. Because I think in some cases, you're gonna actually wanna prepare both.
Yep.
I know we've done that in the past when I didn't really understand which way the commission was gonna go on it. So, you know, we worked out both options so that we weren't fumbling around.
And that's, you know, one of the things that they talked about in the land use training we went to was, you know, the process by which we don't need to be in a hurry to approve the application. We get done with the public hearing, we get all the information, we think about it a little bit. And then, you know, that gives the zoning enforcement officer an opportunity to prepare, you know, figure out what the conditions of approval ought to be for approval, for denial and all that. And we'll take care of that at the next meeting. I know there's some times where it's a fairly easy thing, we try to get it done on the fly. And normally when I'm trying to come up with conditions of approval on the fly, I goof it up, so I like the process where we do it in a little more formal manner there. Next one coming down talks about submitting all commission decisions for publication for newspaper. You know, this is where we put it in the paper so that you know, people get noticed of what we're doing. Then down at the bottom of that page, before the election of officers, I added maintain online folders for each application, up to date with pertinent information, including all PCC correspondence. When application is complete, have the application folder transferred to the archive listing. So that that's one of my goals for having the zoning enforcement officer do that. Moving on to election of officers. That biannual organizational meeting shall be held as part of the first meeting, which is scheduled following a public election for town officials. You know, we're not doing an election for town officials. We don't get together and figure out who's going to be the next chairman or vice chairman.
Can I just suggest that you say the first meeting after any new zoning commission members have been seated? Because you may have a meeting right after an election, and there may have been a decision, but they may not yet be seated. So you wanna wait till whoever your new members are seated before you have any.
Eric, could you say that again?
So if you have an election, and then you have a planning and zoning meeting 4 or 5 days later or a week later, even though the zoning new commission members may be elected, they're not yet seated, they're not
Oh,
yet
okay.
in session. So it should be the first meeting after the new officers are, the new members are seated.
So we would change it to say, public election for town officials, at which time officers will be elected and seated. That takes care of it.
Elected and seated, John.
Is this what we're talking about? First meeting, which is scheduled following.
Officers will be elected and seated right before any event.
Oh, shall be,
Yeah, right there.
at which time, shall be. At which time new members are seated and officers will be elected?
No, elected and seated, you know, they get elected first, then they get
Oh.
seated after they're sworn in.
Well.
No, you're talking, I thought Eric was talking about general membership, not officers, right?
Right, so what happens, you have an election, a new board member gets elected. He then, after a certain date, he then gets sworn in and he becomes seated with the commission. After the new officers are seated with the commission, then you hold elections to elect your officers of the commission so that the people who are now on the commission get to vote on that. Does that make sense?
Or can you get
Yeah,
elected?
I'm just trying to see it. Should we just say the election, the following the election and seating of members?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Okay, moving down to article alternates, the commission, we just added the word as. Just to make the sentence proper English. Under meetings, we just said regular meetings will be held monthly, currently, we still say we're the third Monday of the month. And so we took out what the day of the week was gonna be. And just said that the schedule will be posted on the town website, so, at the end of the year, we come up with a schedule for the following year, and those are the dates. If for some reason we don't wanna do one on the third Tuesday, we can change it. Oh, one of the things I wrestled with in section 4 on page 6, and I guess we'll just leave it the way it is. Alternate members of the commission who are seated at the beginning of a meeting shall not be replaced by another member who arrives late. So, yeah, we gotta get everybody to show up on time. If we see somebody, that's the way it currently says, and my thought is we just leave it that way. Now,
Sometimes we do have trouble. with
trouble logging in,
extension.
yep, we do, and so if you're not gonna be there, let me know. I try to delay starting the meeting a little bit if I think somebody's gonna be there trying to get in and go that way, but ought to be on time. The under disqualifications, we said no member of the commission shall participate in the hearing or decision of the commission in which used to say he is directly or indirectly interested. I wrestled with putting he, she, and we just decided that it would be in which the member is directly or indirectly. So we get that issue out of the disqualification chapter. On page 7. Grammar change there, but coming down to section 6 under the minutes, I don't have this one straightened out yet. Maybe Eric knows the process, how this is really supposed to work. It says the commission shall review, amend as needed, and approve the minutes of all meetings. Any amendments to the minutes shall be made in ink to the official copy submitted to the town clerk. After making amendments, the secretary shall initial said minutes to indicate final approval. We don't have a secretary. And I know I have never initialed it. I tried to understand from Marina what we did on this. I think she told me that the way it works, according to town clerk maybe, is that you look at the minutes and you look at the following minutes to see if there are any changes to the previous minutes, and that's how you know if there's any changes. I'm not sure that's makes the most sense to me, but I know, so I've got to go out and figure out a better line there, and I forgot to do that before we got together for this go through. And just for the process, if everybody's fairly happy with the way the bylaws look, what I'll do is I'll run it through our grants, then next meeting we'll vote on it. So that's how I'm planning to do that. Section 3 under that same thing was kind of interesting. A competent stenographer shall record the evidence, and such evidence shall be recorded by an audio recording device. Well, we have the audio recording device visual too. I was gonna get rid of the stenographer, but that's still in the state statute, you gotta have a stenographer. So I just left it in there. And then under public relations, under section 2, I It used to say the commission shall comply with sections 119, 120, 121 of the general statutes. Those statutes no longer exist, and so, these are the words that Mark Grant suggested to put in there. It's all freedom of information stuff. And that was really it, so I don't think there's, a lot that anybody would get all excited about in there, but we did get rid of those Monday meetings. And, we haven't done those in a while. So. Everybody reasonably happy with those, so that if we get the blessing of our attorney, we can vote on those next month. Okay, moving on. I was going to do an executive session to interview candidates for planning zoning commission alternate member vacancy. I was expecting one more fellow to show up tonight. So he was gonna be here, he's not here. We have one fellow that did show up tonight. He showed up the last time we got together, to talk about these. I thought last time he was gonna be, he would be an exceptional member of the team. Still think that. I thought we picked another exceptional member of the team that had lots of experience. I think the best way to start out is by an alternate, and so, anybody have any questions for Andreas? Want to hear anything about his background? I sent out the little paragraph he sent me. But I think from his interactions here tonight, seems like he would be a good guy to have on the team.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really an honor. Thank you for thinking of me, and giving me this opportunity. I participated in meetings in high school that was required for us to do. I went to Ledyard High School, so we got to go to these meetings, town meetings. So it was kind of fascinating, so being part of the zoning commission, I think it's important. I think I don't want to say it's a thankless job, but it's definitely a job that's important to people to recognize it as doing the work here and things that you guys discuss and decisions that are made affect everybody here, whether they realize it or not. So I want to be part of that process, part of that decision making that represent everybody here, not just people that think like me, but people that don't. And kind of find that sweet spot, middle ground, and preserve the nature of this town. The reason why we moved here is because of the tranquility, if you will, the nature, and the history. So we're very happy to be here. My wife and I, she's an attorney, she's a real estate attorney. I work at Pratt & Whitney, I've been there for 14 years. Before that, I worked in healthcare, and I worked in my father's pizza restaurant for 10 years, so I know about restaurants, I know about healthcare, I studied biology at Eastern Connecticut State University. Got a couple of engineering degrees through Pratt, so I understand technical stuff as well. And so I think I can bring a lot to the table. I'm also a country guy. I love tractors, cars, everything in between, so pretty hands-on with things, so yeah.
Anybody got any questions? I'd like to ask Andreas at this point.
Jeff, you bring this up, you look at minority representation. And the reason I say that is CBA, I'm just having a problem, CBA came up. I mean, the alternates are treated kind of as a separate commission.
They are,
I never heard of this.
that's what got us into problems with, when Patrick was on the ballot, and he declined because we had to have. I can't remember, it's like representation.
But what was sort of three alternates, right? Only two of them can be of the same party,
Yep,
so. Or put forward by the same party. Not, okay, but no, of the same.
So here's what I know of him. In the alternate arena right now, we've got one Democrat, and one Republican.
Good enough, fine,
It's
it's
all
all.
independent. Okay, so there we got one of each. So I do, no matter what we did, we were okay from that perspective. Makes it- Yep, it does, it was, very good, so.
And I just, wanna make two quick points, the reason why you bring that up is because it is under state statutes. It's not, any of your land use commissions should be completely nonpartisan anyway. Jim just brought that up because it's not an Andover thing, it's something that, you know, that we have to adhere to, and I like what you said about, you know, there may be times when, you know, you don't agree with people and vice versa, and that does happen, you just, as you know, have to use your best judgment and go by the regulations, and then if there's any leeway, you should try to be able to defend your position, whether it's favorable to somebody or less favorable to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I think, I'm a data guy, so I like to look at the data, look at the facts, look at the regulations. For my personal. Yeah.
Sure. We will have some educational requirements under current state law.
Okay.
If you do get appointed to this position, they have a minimum mandatory number of hours of training.
Okay.
There are a series of fabulous programs for land use law. One is by the Connecticut Bar Association, and then the other is by CLEAR, which is the Connecticut Land Use Academy. I would suggest you take the CLEAR training for basically beginner, you know, commission members, land use commission members. You know, and then a year or two take the advanced. You get a lot out of it and a better understanding of what your role is in the commission. The commission, so you know, Andover has a combined planning commission and zoning commission. Towns are allowed to have them combined or separate commissions. Since we're small, we operate a combined commission. And you operate under kind of two different sets of authority depending on what you're doing. If you are, so when you make regulations and the commission implements new regulations, you're basically setting land use law and you're acting in kind of a judicial capacity. And then if you have an application before you, you're acting in kind of an executive capacity and your responsibility. So the commission gets to make land use law, but then it has to abide by the land use law that it created. So depending on what you're doing, your authority changes. But it is their powerful positions. You have, the commission has a lot of say in the workings of a town, what can and can't be done.
So just point me in the right direction and where I need to do that training.
There's information on the town's website and.
Yeah. I can send some stuff to Andreas also.
Yep, perfect.
Yep.
So I will make a motion to approve Andreas Haladas as an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries 5-0-0. Congratulations, Andreas.
All right, thanks, guys.
Welcome to the team.
Pleasure. It's, let me, I don't get it, it's Philippus, it's a Greek name.
Willis.
Yeah.
Okay, I know I was.
I
That's why I
was,
waited saying it until this part, but I had to get it in motion.
that's where the pizza thing comes in, my father's Greek, my mother's Hungarian, so I speak fluent Hungarian. If you guys ever come across someone that doesn't speak English, speaks Hungarian, I'll be more than happy.
Good to know. You said 5-0-0, it's probably technically 7-0-0. Alternates are allowed to vote on that.
That's true. Been here, yep.
Yep.
So. Yeah,
That's pretty secure now.
yeah. Okay, 7-0-0.
Eric used to be the chairman before he was the town administrator.
He's done a great job.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Okay, next up is correspondence. Jim, you got any correspondence?
I got nothing.
Farewell cards that okay, very good. Administrative reports, got any of those, Jim? No. Moving right along. How about zoning agent? No?
No.
Inland wetlands water course agent, I got nothing either, nothing here going on there. John, you got anything else for us tonight?
Nothing additional.
Okay. Probably looking around there and here, nobody else for public speak?
Oh, I wanna thank John for helping us distill all the Economic Development Commission ideas into the presentation that I gave tonight. It was a lot of times, literally, I took his notes from our last meeting and transferred it over my old PowerPoint, so I wanna give John credit for credit's due.
Okay, thank you. The approval of the minutes, and we've got a couple of them. Because I added the agenda and then forgot to do it last month. We'll start with the regular meeting, public hearing and regular meeting from February 18th, 2025. Any comments on those minutes? And the only comment I had was under old business, executive session, pending litigation involving the same gravel operation, it should really be the sand gravel operation. That's the only thing I had on that. Anybody else have anything? Make a motion to approve the minutes from February 18th, public hearing and regular meeting as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Leanne. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? That motion passes 5-0. Next up is the minutes from March 18th. And the only comment I had on that was on page 2. Under administrative reports, inland wetland and water course agent, talked about work beginning on the driveway on Woodland Street, question. And I think the question there is to Woodland Street as the address of the place where the driveway is going in. Any other changes to those minutes? Hearing none, I make a motion to approve the minutes from March 18th. As amended. Back seconded? Okay, any further discussion? None? Call for a vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion passes 5-0. Next regularly scheduled meeting to be held as hybrid on May 20th. Any final comments other than Jim? Thank you so much for everything you've done over the last 8 years. Enjoy retirement. That you can travel. I guess you didn't feel guilty too many times taking those look arounds. Yeah. Free and clear. Don't have the ball. Thank you for everything you've done.
And thanks for staying on during the training period.
Oh, I was gonna ask, has anybody heard anything back from the training
Tell them what?
on the 22nd? Like I have not seen, we were supposed to get links to the training and all that stuff and diplomas. I've got nothing. Anybody get anything?
No, and I sent her an email also. She responded back, it was gonna be ready next week, and I have seen it.
Okay, yeah, so. Who all attended? Andy didn't make it?
No, I didn't make it.
Okay. Okay, so you guys have to do the clear training that you've already done that at some point this year. Before the end of the year, when I have to send in my little report to the board of selectmen, I do think
So we only
that.
have to do one of them?
Oh, you have to do 4.5 hours.
No, I mean, I did the reservoir, but I didn't do the.
Yeah, so that's, yes, contrary to what they wrote initially in that thing. You know, and I think what Mark Ransom pointed out during the training, that there's enough affordable housing in there that we get our full credit. So everybody who attended that training is free and clear. No more training for another 2 years. It's an every 2-year requirement, so you'll have to do, and those feel like careers are really pretty good, so.
The one thing I would say about the basic clear course is that there's a lot of emphasis on reading maps and reading drawings and stuff like that. And if you're not really used to looking at shop drawings or topographical lines on a map, that can be pretty helpful. So it's not the legal aspect, it's the kind of nuts and bolts, of how you review something and what it looks like and what it all means. So that may be of interest.
There's 3 little clear courses that if you do all 3 of them, that fulfills the requirement, and I think you'll find it pretty helpful, they're pretty good, you know.
Yeah, I've looked through the GIC numerous times and put the layers on there and trying to understand what it means, so. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Any other last minute discussion? Make a motion, we adjourn. Thank you, Ann. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
That's.
Eric, did you, so we looked at May